Hey guys, thanks for coming along. Thanks Mike for making the trip.
No, pleasure, mate.
Obviously we crossed paths like over the last sort of 7 or 8 years while I've been at McGrath, and I think the main reason I wanted you to come and talk to the team and talk to Nick and I is just seeing your growth over the last 7 years, and just someone that probably has stuck at it, and that's why I wanted to sort of get you down here and tell us about not probably how your business is running now, but more how you got to where you are now. So to give sort of everyone sort of a bit of an idea on how to get there.
Yep.
I know you're not going to have the magic dust straight away, but if we can all just pick up one or two things on, how you went from, riding a couple 100K to where you are now, 166 deals so far this financial year. Keen to know, I guess, how you started off in real estate, and give us a bit of background around you, and
Sure.
And then we'll just tap in with some questions along the way.
So a bit about my background. We're just talking about sport on the way over from the cafe. I started as a professional athlete over in England and moved back to Australia when I was young. Didn't really do well at school. Didn't sort of achieve what you're supposed to from a backup point of view, as they used to say. Didn't really have any job, and then a guy in St Mary's at the time, I grew up in Penrith, he offered me a sort of what they used to call a sales creator role, so it's really like his assistant. That worked out really well. From my point of view, it was just good guidance to get into real estate and understand that I didn't need a uni degree. I didn't need, back then, UAI, they used to call it. I didn't need any of that sort of stuff. So to me, it was a career that I could actually emulate what this guy was doing on a different scale without actually getting an education. So that to me worked really well. Been in the industry now for 12 years, 10 years in Ride, so it's worked out pretty well in Ride. Originally, I owned the business in Ride, so I opened the business with my old business partner, Stefan Bertram. He's now moved on. He works in Mossman now, and at the moment it's sort of grown from originally the first year in Ride I did not even 100,000 GCI. I was mainly working in the back end. Year sort of 3 or 4 I did 400,000, and this year we're on track to do 4.9 million. So yeah, it's sort of grown progressively. There's not been, it's the same as what Ray Kroc, if anyone sort of studies and that sort of stuff, like overnight successes aren't really something that you talk about, that they don't happen. 10 years is a long overnight success, as I would say, but it's mainly sticking at it through the tough times, through the good times, staying disciplined in the consistencies of your little processes and your structures around your team. I've got a lot of disciplines in my business that we make sure that the team actually operates on. Everything from sort of how to list and what we do on the back of it, to not champion the deal unless you champion it for the right reasons. So like one simple thing which we'll go through probably is more around when we get a deal, we don't just celebrate the deal around what price it was or how it sold prior to auction and we had 3 offers. It's more about, okay, well what's come off the back of that deal? How many listings have we actually already created that listing is going to help us sign up now, and how many are we going to convert based on that deal to actually leverage on that? So that's probably the biggest thing that we champion on every sale.
You have some accountability around that as well. How does that look for your business?
Yeah, so for us, we've got everyone in our team is very structured. I was saying earlier to these guys that I've got strict roles and responsibilities in the team as far as what their responsibilities are, what they need to do in their job descriptions. Every single person has an understanding of staying in their own lane, so to speak. So in my business, I've got 2 associates plus myself, so they list and sell properties. Every single one of us has a role and responsibility around the type of property, the type of person we're trying to list and sell. If it's a 3-bedroom villa in Ride, I don't actually go near it. I champion Chris, who's my associate, and I get him in the door on that and try and make sure that client understands that I'm still involved, but Chris is the person I need to be speaking to because he's sold all the villas in Ride recently and he's going to be more passionate about your product than me, but I'll be there to finalise the deal and help get that over the line. And each one of them understands that, yeah, basically the leverage on top of that sale is where their business is going to be created from in the future. So accountability around that is how many appraisals, how many buyer appointments, all the simple KPIs we focus on each week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And who's tracking that? So at the end of the campaign, the deal's done, the next day, you're doing the callbacks, are you, the person that's calling that, booklet, just say, for example, are they then sending the numbers through to the team? Is that going direct to an EA? Is it going directly to you? Who does that?
No, I think it's just a culture. So I'm not a very big person around Nazi, like when it comes to performance and all that sort of stuff. For me, it's understanding the right people that sort of fit in the team. So for example, our Monday and Wednesday meetings, sometimes they start at 8 o'clock, sometimes they start at 8:15, sometimes 8:30. It's just whenever the last person gets in the office. But if we're not sort of performing, then it's 8 o'clock. Yeah. If we're well ahead of our schedule, then we're a little bit more relaxed, we're a little bit more understanding of where we are. From a monthly point of view, we've got little structures and systems that each sales agent needs to abide by. So we've got like a monthly tracking sheet, which is actually here, guys. This is my monthly tracking sheet. So on the monthly tracking sheet, every month I track every single property I'm trying to list. So the ones that are highlighted green, I've already listed them. The ones that aren't, they're the ones that I'm chasing. I've got off-market deals down here. Then May, these are all the properties we're trying to sell in May. These are all the properties that are listed for auctions in June. For me, I don't do it anymore, but down the bottom, we track appraisals and we also track buyer appointments. The reason why I don't do it anymore is I don't actually go to many appraisals anymore. So I still go and sort of visit people and have a walk through their house if they're thinking of selling in 6 months' time. I don't really sort of track that myself because most of the business that I'm actually focused on is what I call catch and kill. So it's basically, if you're thinking of selling, then I'm extra motivated to get that deal. If they're not thinking of selling right now, then I build up the rapport over the next 2-3 months, and then I'll get the appraisal when it's necessary. So yeah, Chris and Johnny are a different caliber. So they're basically at the level now where they need to increase the appraisals that they're doing, because for them, if their skill set's not where it needs to be to catch and kill everyone, then they need to get to a level where it's a numbers game. The more people they're getting in front of, they'll probably stumble across 2 or 3 that they weren't ever going to get just because their numbers are high. If that makes sense.
And have you noticed that more probably over the last year or two now that you got a bit more of a name and obviously track record, that you're getting a lot more catch and kill? You're not having to nurture people for year on year?
Yeah, I think it's easier to catch and kill now.
Yeah.
I think there's no doubt that you can leverage on that reputation and market share a lot more when you're at that level, but you've still got to sort of make sure you're hungry, make sure you're competitive. Like I was saying at Cafe this morning, if you rest on your laurels and another agent gets in there, you're still going to lose 1 or 2. Like it's not just about your market share. So you can't sort of sit back and think that you've done it all. You've still got, there's a new client. You're only as good as your next deal. So I think from their point of view, they only look at you how much you care about their actual property, not what you've actually done. If that makes sense. So I think
it's a good point though, actually. That's good.
From our point of view, the way I look at my team is like, we've got our own individual targets. It's very simple from a list point of view. I need to list 10 a month. If I list 10 a month, Chris lists 8 and Johnny lists 5, then we know we've hit our targets. Like it's just very, very simple. If I list 15, Johnny lists 3 and Chris lists 2, then I know we're still very close. And if someone has a really good month, then it sort of levels itself out, which is really good. And we track all of that. Yeah.
Good. Let's rewind it back a bit. So to when you were writing 400K. So how many years ago was that?
That was 5 years ago.
6 years. 6 years. So when you're writing 400, what's that? Like 50 deals?
30 deals roughly.
Yep. And how many were how many of those were houses versus apartments? Was it about 50-50 or more houses?
Probably about 50-50.
Okay, so you've always had pretty good market share with the houses.
Yeah, pretty good market share, but not. I mean, back then it wasn't really a lot of market share. There was we weren't doing a lot of auctions. As well. So auctions have actually helped us get into a different market and a different presence. So that's actually. I mean, if there's anything that McGrath has brought to our business when we sold the business to McGrath was auctions, because we didn't do hardly any auctions 6 years ago. When we converted over to McGrath, we literally basically just went out and copied all the best local agents. So I went and visited Minty's office, Alex Mintorn, Pete Chauncey, Matt Steinway up at Central Coast. Like we literally just ripped off and duplicated everyone's systems and just figured out what was going to work in our area. And then we basically just fine-tuned it to sort of suit our clients, but also sort of provide our clients with a bit of a point of difference that other agents in our area weren't doing. There's a lot of agents in our area doing auctions without price guides. And I came out and did a whole heap of auctions with price guides, and so did Stefan. It sort of gave us a different set of transparency in our area. So that was one of the little things that we did. The other things that we were doing was sort of moving auctions. So we would sort of bring them forward a week or delay them a week, and that was new to our area because a lot of the older agents in our area just weren't proactive in that. So being able to guide buyers and being able to sort of get good results by shortening and extending, that gave us really good case studies to then leverage on as well. So that was all really good.
Good. And what did the team look like then? So when you were, 5 years ago, it was you and...
just me and Chris.
You and Chris? And Chris was an associate or assistant?
Chris was what I'd call a buyer manager.
Yeah.
So basically he was just dealing with the buyers and sort of leveraging the buyers to get interest. And then basically once they were interested, escalating it to me. I was doing the deal. Then we plugged in an assistant in the back end. So we had someone then taking care of all our administration. Initially it was the McGrath person. So I forget what they used to call it at McGrath, but basically just McGrath help. So they would take care of all the admin and stuff. And then as soon as I plugged in that back end, that's when I felt a little bit more leverage coming my direction, because it sort of freed me up to not sort of liaise back and forward with an out-of-office assistant. I had an in-office assistant that basically I could just leverage on, and then it just went to another level again.
Interesting you started with an associate, then went the... Because that's obviously what I did with Nick, and I think Nicky did the same as well. So sometimes trying to get, I guess, don't put someone on to get busier. Don't put someone on because you're too busy. That was sort of always my mentality. That let's put an associate on to go the next level together, and then when we get too busy, then we'll put on the CSM, which sounds like similar to the way you've done it.
Very similar. I mean, I was already actually talking to Chris prior to moving across to McGrath, so it sort of worked out well that I was already in discussions with him about coming on board before we became McGrath, and that actually helped me sort of convince him to come across with me, because he understood the brand, he understood sort of the presence that it had in the inner west as well. So that all helped, and it was just sort of an easy process for us. Stefan had another guy already working with him back then, James Ginn, who some of you might know, and it was just the best and suitable model to sort of already copy what Stefan was doing, basically.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. And then talk us through, okay, so you did 400, then you put on you had your associate and your CSM, then the following year, what sort of numbers were you writing? Then talk us through, to where you are now.
The next year, first year with McGrath, we wrote just over $1 million and 50. So I went from 460 the year before to $1 million and 50, I think it was.
So doubled the business.
Which worked quite well, because then that gave us a bit of leverage. Then in 2017, it grew again. I think grew up to 1.37.
And talk us through, at that stage, what were your calls, what were your connects, what was your sort of daily? Because then you would have been a bit more numbers-wise, or all the way through you've been?
Back then it was more numbers related, more appraisals. So I had a target of hitting 40 appraisals a month back then. Yep. So 40 a month was like a non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. I'd have a strict rule, which I still do. If I still need to go and do an appraisal, which I don't say no to everyone, but the reality is if I go do an appraisal now, it's like a 15-minute walkthrough, and I've got a rule where I try not to sit down. So if it's a client that I know is not selling, same as back then, I would walk around, build the rapport, grab little things like a Kobe Bryant jersey that's on the wall, talk about basketball, just all these little things that's going to build rapport for the future. And then basically I wouldn't sit down.
For you, an appraisal, someone who's not selling immediately.
Yeah. So if they literally, if you've got no chance of them selling and they're not even close to it, whether it be a financial situation, whether it be retirement in our area, we've got a lot of elderly people, not elderly, but people that are thinking about retiring and they just weren't ready yet. So no matter how hard you would push and how creative you'd get, they're not going to fast track the retirement. Yeah, if that makes sense. So you're better off just building the rapport up for that 6 months, making sure that by the time they do retire, you're the only agent there.
So you sent Chris out?
No, I would go. So for those ones, I'd go and basically just do a quick 15-minute walk around.
Right.
Build the rapport around the house. Then I'd basically put them on like a creative follow-up support list, and then just keep chipping away at it, which always worked well. Yeah. So the numbers were always high originally because, like I was saying before, it's a numbers game. Back then, I didn't have the skill I would assume like I do now, like the understanding of the importance of how to list, how to sell. I think I've leveraged a lot more from good agents like these guys and even you, Chris, like a few agents around that I'm just picking things from and basically copying. I didn't have that back then. So it was literally a numbers game. You do the high numbers, then I used to have a saying, even a blind squirrel can get a nut sometimes. So the reality is that you don't have to be perfect, you just have to be there. So that was me back then, whereas now you emulate that work ethic with the sort of skill and dialogue and creativity. That's going to help, obviously, convert more and quicker.
And so what appraisals, what do you call someone who's going to sell? Some people say, hey, we're selling within 3 months.
No, it's generally it used to be a phone call to them. I never used to get a lot of people calling. So generally it'd be on a prospecting call. I used to look for what I'd call buying signals, like little things like people saying, oh, Michael, we were just up the Central Coast last week looking at some properties. They might not be ready to move right now, but anyone who drives half an hour to look at properties, generally they might be tempted to sell if I can put the right buyer in front of them. So that to me is someone that I'd spend a little bit more time with. Try and pick a few little pieces to get creative. We used to try and we still do a lot of it. I used to try and get people listed and show off market before we actually converted on market. So I used to do a lot of that in Ride, and that was another point of difference that other agents in our area just weren't doing. Owners in our area weren't feeling the pressure. They weren't feeling the hassle of sort of styling and presentation and then photography and all that. Oh wow, I'm selling moment. It was like a slow, gradual process. Yeah, so, and that still works to this day.
Yeah. And can you walk us through what your team looks like now?
Yeah, so now I've got 2 buyer specialists. I've got Kenny Lee and Kelly Samuels. So they handle buyers on every single listing, and it's sort of divided by Lane Cove Road. So Kenny will handle anything on the western side of Lane Cove Road. Kelly will handle anything on the northern side and eastern side of Lane Cove Road. So if I list a property in North Ryde, Kelly will handle every single buyer inquiry. She'll do the open home callbacks. She'll handle everything in regards to that sale. Chris and Johnny, they're my associate agents, so they list and sell properties themselves, but they've got their own specific target market, basically. So Chris specialises in North Ryde and East Ryde. So how it works is if someone calls me up and they've got a 3-bedroom house in North Ryde, and they say, oh, Michael, we really want to sell. We've seen your signs everywhere. You guys are absolutely killing it. I'll say, listen, that's perfect. What I'll do is I'll arrange for Chris to give you a call. He's the person you need to speak to. He sold 10 Donald Street recently. He sold 5 Primrose. He really needs to probably be the one you're speaking to because he's got about 50 buyers on the back of those ones that's perfect for your place. What I'll do is I'll get him to call you. He'll do the initial meeting and obviously come meet with you, and then both of us will really look forward to helping you. So it's champion him in that scenario. Then he goes out, lists that one, and then we're both on the signboard together and sort of go through that process.
And he runs the whole thing for you, you're not involved in all
He runs everything from the negotiation with the owner to just everything. I'm more there from a profile point of view, from that owner's point of view.
You don't think you get any pushback from owners on that? They're all comfortable with it?
No, I don't,
How you set it up.
It's all about how you set it up. Yeah, exactly. So it's all about, like, if I champion Chris, I was saying to these guys this morning, one thing in real estate is like people are used to real estate agents actually asking for the business and saying, no, I'm the best, you should go with me. All right, but if I'm just a consultant and they're calling me, asking me for my advice, and I turn around and say, listen, there's no one better for you than Chris Panisi. Like it's actually giving them professional advice without sort of getting a benefit, if that makes sense. So it's kind of in turn, it's not what they're expecting, but they're also then getting Chris coming in, and Chris is a hard worker, passionate. He's what I was 8 years ago in regards to that house in North Ryde, which could be a knockdown house in North Ryde. Now, where the market sort of differs in Ryde is we've got sort of prestige properties, which are anything sort of 3 million, around that. Then your knockdown is sort of 1.8 to 2. So anything like that, Chris will handle. But any of the prestige stuff, I'm extra passionate about. And I'm the opposite. So I'll go, yeah, definitely, I'll come down and help you. I've just sold 3 around the corner from you. I've got this buyer that missed out on those ones. They were the underbidders. Let me come and run you through how that looks. And I become the passionate person. Does that make sense? So it's sort of going back to what I was saying before, we've got our lanes and we just stick to those lanes. And Johnny's the same with apartments. So Johnny's in his first year of selling properties, he's on track to do 450,000 GCI, just selling apartments. So
How many transactions is that?
for him, I think it's 40, roughly. I think he's 38 to 40.
How old is
his first year?
It's pretty good.
34.
How many of those have you fed to him, and how many has he hunted himself?
So all of those, apart from 3, have been fed directly through the business.
Yep.
So
What do you mean by that, though?
So they've either called me or they've called the office. Could be an open agent lead, could be a realestate.com lead that's sort of coming to me, and then I just basically send it to Johnny and
So
Johnny
you
calls
unlisted
it.
himself?
Yep. Yep. So
You don't go to the appraisal and
don't do anything. No. So it's literally it's a combined profile. It's very similar. So Stefan and I originally started doing it because we've got the model from overseas in America. So the guys over there, they do it constantly. There's a company called Compass. There's a guy called Tim Smith who works for, I forget who it is, but he was someone that we sort of looked at and go, well, if he's a listing agent, he only does the prestige properties, and then he's got other associates in his team that specialise in this product, specialise in this product, then if they do it, why can't we do it? And that was the sort of mentality at the time, because in Ride, to get to 5 million GCI or 10 million GCI, that's going to involve 400 transactions. And I've got 3 kids, I've got a life, like I don't want mayhem. So the reality is either I try and leverage off other people and sort of the team, or I run myself into the ground, and that just wasn't an option. Yeah.
Can you talk to the team about, so you obviously were owned your own company, and now McGrath's bought you out.
Yep.
So you're like a subcontractor, no different to all of ours. How do you feel that works for you versus when you own your own business? Because obviously it could be perceived that the people under you, you've got a few staff from work out, you're about 5 staff.
5, yeah.
Could be on higher splits. Like I say, could be perceived if you had your own company, they could be on higher splits. Obviously they're not, because you're under McGrath.
Yep.
What do you feel the benefits of that, if any?
So for me, leverage is probably the biggest one. So they get leverage off my profile. For me, I don't think they would necessarily get bigger splits, because it's all skill capacity and what they're going to bring in. So like I said, I rank everything in my business. I break it all down to what they've actually sourced on their own and brought into the business versus what I've actually contributed to their business as well. So it sort of works both ways. Like Chris, for example, this year is on track to do 1.2 million GCI. The business itself, like the Team Dowling business, has contributed 16% of his total, obviously his total GCI, 16% is contributing to us, 11% he's contributed himself. So basically he needs to get to 100% contribution for his own GCI before he's going to be writing 1.2 million on his own. And that's the way we look at it. If he gets to that level and he wants to go out on his own one day and stuff like that, then happy days, good luck to him. For me, the reason why I sort of like the situation now is because, I don't like property management. I hate the business model. Like I used to sort of run that side of things, and Stefan used to be our salesperson, and I hated the licensing, I hated the compliance, I hated the property management, I hated the recruitment. We got up to 27 staff because we bought another local business as well, and it was literally like an adult daycare centre. Whereas now I've got my own EBU, my own team, and the culture is derived from sort of my work ethic, from my processes, from my procedures, and it's not going to grow to a stage where I've got 20 staff. And if I do, that's probably going to be a really good problem to have, because we're going to be writing 20 mil GCI. Does that make sense? So it's a different track of mind, whereas
100%
you can control it.
Sales as opposed
Exactly.
to
Yeah,
50 or whatever it may have been.
Exactly. There's a lot more control. Yeah, definitely.
Because it's your team.
Yeah.
Within the team.
Yeah, exactly.
Within the
And
office.
the leverage is purely built on profile. It's not built on profile, referrals, your results. Like I said before, you're only as good as your last sale result and how you've treated that recent client.
Yep.
It's not built on the possibility of a tenant possibly complaining because we didn't get their rent right, and then we had to go and meet with them, or however it works out. But it might just be a random complaint that tarnishes the sales business. Whereas right now we've just got a really good, well-oiled machine.
Yeah, nice. Now talk us back through. Okay, so you're at 137 4 years ago.
Yep.
Where did we go from there?
So there's a couple of things that happened in between that. So 2017, everyone probably remembers, was a really good market. So that, I think personally, it'd be very easy for me to speak to anyone and say that it was all me. I think the market trajectory at that time actually helped and assisted in a bit of that growth.
Yep.
Then 2018, the market came off the boil a little bit, and we had to actually sort of I restructured the business a little bit. So I changed a few little things that we're doing as far as databasing, how we're managing clients.
Yeah.
I added in a couple of virtual assistants as well. So I work with a company called Trust the Process. So really, really good company from overseas. If anyone needs virtual assistants, I've used a couple of different companies overseas, but this company is definitely the one that far beats anyone else because they give you the virtual assistant to train and actually go through your processes, whereas most sort of keep them accountable to their systems. But that was actually a really good thing for me because then what it allowed me to do is sort of each campaign, my assistant in the office, so Sarah, she basically was then able to leverage and become more of a vendor relationship manager. So for me, that actually, again, then assisted me to go out and get more business because I wasn't handling the vendors and conditioning them about photos and educating them about how to present the property. Sarah took over that whole role, and for me, the assistant role then became like a marketing coordinator / vendor relationship manager. And overseas, got the checklist to do all the compliance and the listing online and all that sort of stuff. So that again helped me position everything. So then the next year we went boom again and we jumped up to 2.2.
Yeah.
So it sort of, it didn't happen overnight. Like I said, it was 1.3. The next year it was 1.31. So we dropped a little bit in 2018 in that little bit of a sort of stagnant market. But again, I looked at that back then, and a lot of people were dooming and glooming about the market and how bad it was. But I was refreshing things and changing the business around and plugging different people in because I knew that something was going to happen over the next 12 months. And then we looked at our GCI at the end of the year, and everyone else, like I remember having conversations with a couple of guys who've now left McGrath, and they were going like, wow, we've done 3/4 of what we did last year and we've dropped 30-40% GCI. And I was looking at the business going, wow, I've dropped 60 grand, 70 grand. So for me, that was actually a big win in a market that was really tough to sell. I'm sure everyone went through it, but I don't think I've ever gone through a market where buyers just couldn't buy. And that was for me a massive learning curve. When APRA changed those lending regulations and the market just basically collapsed from underneath us, that to me was awesome. And I think it gave us another sense of confidence as well, because if we only dropped 70 grand and then I plugged in a couple of virtual assistants overseas and Chris actually knew that we had extra leverage, that mentally helped everyone just get to another level again. So the year after that, we did 2.2 last year.
Yeah. And what was your drive like to, go and put virtual assistants on? Because I'm a McGrath, I'm paying for that, right? That's you.
Yeah.
And was Chris still there then? Chris was there?
Yeah,
so you had the same
so
team?
same
so you
team.
just put some more money into the business. And then what was your drive? Like what did you want to, was there a number you wanted to hit? Was it just like, hey, this is going well, I want to go more, I want more market share? What was pumping you along?
Well, I think the market share is a big one. It was never about like GCI for me. It was never about getting to number one in McGrath or wherever. Like it's not about that. It's more about how do I service more clients and actually how does Chris get to a position where he's going to be a listing and selling agent? How am I going to plug someone else in? At that time, at the same time that happened, I had a guy, Johnny, who now works with me. He was working with one of my competitors, and he was actually calling me on a regular basis, asking for advice on properties that I was selling. He was asking for advice on auctions, and he was actually working for one of my biggest competitors. And at the same time, I was having little jokes and laughs with Chris about like, this is where we're positioned in the market. If our competitors are actually calling us for advice and how things are working, then I know we're doing something right.
Yeah.
So I could see that something was going to happen, and I could see that we were going to get to somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't actually sort of plan where or and so on.
But you're on the right path.
But we're on the right path. Had excuses along the way as well. So we spoke this morning
tell us some excuses.
about Stefan and obviously the market, and this is a big one that I've chatted with John McGrath about constantly, because me and Stefan were in the same area and we're the two best agents in that area, and to gain more market share, constantly we're coming up in a battle against each other. So it was literally like owners were speaking to Stefan, they were speaking to me, and I had to race quicker to beat Stefan to that lead, otherwise I was going to lose it. And to me that was the wrong culture. So me and Stefan sat down and we basically worked out a split down Lane Cove Road, and I would handle one side of the street, Stefan would handle the other side of the street. Anything on this side of the street, he would refer to me, not even have any further involvement in, and take 50% automatically from that commission. So for me, it built up my profile over here to a level that it was never going to be if we didn't work that deal out. And likewise in North Ride, East Ride, it built Stefan up to a level that he probably was never going to get to if I was still getting listings and still selling in North Ride and East Ride. So that alone was another challenge that we worked through, and once we got through that helped us jump again. So it's all these little things that you do along the way. You've got to have an understanding of how to take a step back, how to sort of look at your business from afar and go, well, what little pokes and prods can I make that's going to sort of take it to another level?
I think that's perfect because, like at the end of the day, it wasn't just mapped out for you. It wasn't like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. There's some trial and errors, and I think that's a big thing about this game. That's why we don't win every listing.
Yeah.
That's why we don't get every property sold. Like, there are things along the way. And the best thing about real estate, I tell my guys all the time, or anyone starting out, we do the same job every day, but there's different ways on how we get there. And, at the end of the day, we meet different buyers along the way and sellers. And as long as we can pick things up, with every transaction to be better, it's also with running a business the same way. There's things that, him and Stefan were bang, bang, bang on location, and then they worked out a simple case of, okay, anything, on this side, is you, and the other one's me, and then they sort of worked.
A lot of people would say no to that because they would look straight away at the 50% referral.
Yep.
And like when we first sat down and we go, well, what's a fair referral? And we both sort of said, well, is it 20%? Is it 50%? Is it 80%? Because you're basically getting a walkover listing because someone else with a good profile is championing you in on it. 50 was like a fair number for me because I saw the leverage it was going to create by just keeping Stefan out of that area. So the reality is that for me that was already a market share that if I got a large market share there, then there is surrounding suburbs like Eastwood, Marsfield, Ermington, Putney. All those areas were also then going to get one or two listings on the back of my market share in that area because people would see more signs.
Yep.
And since Stefan's left, I've just gone with the same mentality, but then I've sort of tried to emulate all that in North Ride and East Ride.
Yep.
So it's actually helped by doing the same thing I was doing on this side of the road. It's now helping on that side of the road because we're getting more business in the surrounding suburbs than we've ever got.
Yeah. Perfect, man. And tell me, so you're at 2, 3... What was that, last year or the year before?
Last year, yeah.
So last financial year at 2.3, and where are you at now?
We're on track to do 4.8, 4.9.
4.8, 4.9, so you're doubling again.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than double.
Yeah, more than double, yeah, it's exciting.
Awesome, man.
What do you think it is that's to do another $2 million in a year than you did the year before? There's obviously some really key things that you've changed, or do you think just compounded on, or picking up the phone more and making more calls? What do you think it is?
I think there's a couple of things. Like I put it down, culture first and foremost.
Yeah.
Like they do understand in every business, in every way things are operated. I do think that a fish rots from the head down. So for me, if I'm not doing the right things, if they don't see me listing, selling, actively sort of getting creative, and I mean even some of the little, like there's that one little dialogue I spoke to you guys about this morning about if someone says, no, I've got Alex Phillips or whoever we were talking about this morning, like I get that in my area all the time, but what I say, and I was saying to these guys this morning, I turn around and get passionate about still being a consultant for that person, and I say, listen, I'm not wanting to come in and be the best agent for you or the agent you want to choose. The reason why I want to come and have a look at your house and actually give you a bit of advice is because first of all, I don't want that agent to get it wrong. Second of all, I just want to be the backup option for you. So if they don't do a good result, because I have seen a few of their sales over the last 3 months and they have got one or two wrong. If they do get any one or two, if you're that one or two over the next 3 months, I just want to be the backup option. Can I come and see your home, give you my advice? Then at least you know me, you know what I can actually offer in 3 months' time. And you'd be surprised the amount of times they let you in the door. As you're walking around the home, if you say one or two little gems that the other agent hasn't said, then all of a sudden they're inviting you back down, or you might be able to sort of close it there and then because that agent hasn't given them what you've given them. If my agents in my team see me being creative and passionate like that, then that rubs off onto them, if that makes sense. So the culture is probably the first and foremost. Second is probably the compounding. So there's a whole heap of sayings in sport. It's all about the game of inches and all that sort of stuff. Like you listen to guys like Michael Jordan, basketball fan. You've got Kieran Perkins. Like they all talk about like literally it's the daily habits day in, day out that get them there in 15 years, not 2 months, if that makes sense. So I think one thing that we've stayed focused on from day dot is that we haven't let things waver. Like it's literally just been, We're on game every single day. We know what our targets are daily. We know what our targets are weekly. We don't get disappointed if we don't lose a sale. We don't lose sleep over it for a week. We know what's going to happen. Just move on to the next one. Like there's more than enough to go around. Like you don't get disappointed by one result here and there. You focus on the next 10. So for us, it's a lot about the compounding. The other thing is probably the vision. Like I do a really good example about my foresight. Like in January, I had a guy, Kenny Lee, who is now one of my buyer specialists I was talking about before. For 3 weeks in a row, he kept coming into the office, and I didn't have a position. And I was talking to John McGrath at the time about should I grow again? Shouldn't I? I felt that there was a couple of pain points in the business because we started to get a lot of buyer inquiry. For the first 6 months in this financial year, we actually wrote more than what we're on track to do now. So we actually wrote 2.7 million for the first 6 months of the financial year. And I felt as though there's a few pain points there that are creeping into the business that I felt were going to actually stop us from doing more. And Kenny, whether it be timing, whether it be what, he sort of kept coming into the office for 3 weeks in a row. And I didn't have a job for him, and eventually I just offered him a coffee and we sat down and had a chat. He'd already spoken to Johnny before that. And in the end, I just said, listen, mate, I'll be honest with you, I don't have a job for you, but come work for me. And let's just start off somewhere. And I created a job description for him. And what I did is I just made him what I call a street sergeant. So his job description was a street campaign. So for 3 months, all he did was basically every single listing that me, Chris or Johnny got, he would do a street campaign on every single one of those listings. So just listed or coming soon, just listed, auction invite, just sold. Generate all the leads, send them over to me, Chris, Johnny. In that 3 months, being a fresh person, passionate, hardworking, he's then created a whole heap of listings for us three. And it's sort of, he's navigated his way already into a buyer specialist role after, what are we now, 5 months in. So for me, I didn't need him then, but I knew there was going to be a spot for him and there was going to be a time to use him. And as it's grown, it's just naturally progressed. So I think there's a few things there, but that all wouldn't come down. That all wouldn't come without planning as well. So you've got to plan your business. You've got to understand where you want to be, where you want. A massive possibility that like after COVID, we had a really good experience that first month, like I was saying to you guys. So I thought if this momentum maintains itself, it's going to be a pretty good year. Then there was also the market share that Stefan was leaving behind. Someone had to take it. So I thought, well, there's no one better than me. So why not take that market share? So yeah, there's and even next year there's future opportunity. Like in North Ryde and East Ryde, out of Stefan's market share, we've only brought in a total GCI of 600,000 this year. It's up to 670 now. Stefan wrote 3.8 million last year in North Ryde and East Ryde. So out of his 3.8 million, there's still another, I would say another million out of that is probably mine to win. Other agents will naturally get the others, but I still think we've got a massive opportunity there. So if anyone says, how are you going to get to 6 or 7 million? It's just get my market share in North Ryde, East Ryde. Yeah. That's the way I look at it.
Perfect, Mike. That's awesome. Did anyone have any questions before Mike heads off? Answered everything? All good? Cheers, man. Thanks for coming in. That was awesome, bro.